Welcome back to the Marketing Share. Hello, listeners. I'm Alec.
I'm
now
Barb.
here with Barb. Okay, Barb, we've got a really timely, relevant topic today. It's on the minds of a lot of marketers because we're all wondering what the heck AI is doing to our search.
Yeah. For those of you who've been dreaming about how does my brand come up in those AI searches,
Yeah.
this is your episode.
That's right.
Today we have David Kirkdorffer, and he is a B2B marketing leader and strategic advisor known for helping companies thrive at the intersection of buyer psychology, digital transformation, and brand positioning. And he is now specializing in this area of how your brand is showing up in AI. And I think this is a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
This is like the whole change in how do you become more visible in an AI first world, right?
Yeah.
It's different from SEO and showing up in the keywords. Now it's like, how does my brand show up in Gemini, AI overviews, ChatGPT? Haven't you been thinking about this?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because everyone knows, like everyone's saying, look, I don't even go to the search anymore. I just go to AI. How does that affect all my SEO work? David's going to break this down for us, explain kind of really how it actually works. And then I think once you understand what's actually going on behind the scenes, then it becomes a lot easier to understand, oh, okay, like I see what I need to do. And it's really, the cool thing is it's really not that complicated. It's just going back to some simple basics, but it's going to be good for us, I think,
Yeah,
as
just a
an
few
industry.
nuances that you have to kind of keep in your mind as you're writing and how you're presenting your brand. He's got some great insights. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's go talk to David. Hello, Barb.
Hey, Alec, how's it going?
We're good. I am good. It's good to be back to the Marketing Share and here with a good friend.
Yeah, I'm super psyched. So we have David Kirkdorffer here with us. And I have to tell you, I was searching for my own client how to show up a little bit more prominently for AI searches and AI overviews. And literally, David's article came up and it is chock full of such great information. I really wanted to have him on and dig into some of his work because it's amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, welcome to our podcast, David. It's good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a little while. We're in a marketing community together. And so we have been on periodic calls every now and then. So it's good to see your face again.
It's good to see you too. Yes, it's been a little while.
I know.
Yeah. So David, just we always start out with a kind of quick snapshot. Tell us how you got into this area. Tell us a little bit about your career journey, how you showed up here, and what interested you about this topic.
Okay, so my name is David Kirkdorffer. I've been doing B2B tech marketing for about 30 years. Let's use that number. And I've often been in the part of the organization that's to do with demand generation, i.e. connecting with our prospects, the ideas that we have to share, and seeing if the ideas are shared with them. And if they're interested, they come and see us, right? Okay. When COVID hit, a lot of the demand gen techniques and tactics and strategies, it started failing. Or rather, I should say, their failure just accelerated. People answered the phone even less. People answered emails even less. And so I started talking about buyer enablement. Because I also noticed that when buyers came to the website from my campaigns, they seemed to just crash and not come back, as if something about the website wasn't giving them the information that they were hoping for. And ultimately, they weren't getting the experience that they were hoping for. And I guess to kind of raise it up a level, the experience being satisfaction with their trip, that they got the information they were looking for. I feel my experience was a success if I got the information I was looking for. And so I, for many years, have been consulting with clients on trying to help them with their, what we might call website experience and buyer enablement. And a short circuit to this is you've got lots of sales enablement that's gated behind a sales relationship. You have to speak to a sales rep to get hold of all this good stuff. Mm-hmm. What if you could just get all that good stuff onto the website so that buyers could then find it and use it, and then use that great information to help them select us? And that has all sorts of downstream benefits. So now, how did I get into this AI, LLMS kind of thing? Well, I'm viewing this as AI enablement. So I've got all this great information. Are the AIs getting it all? And it turns out they're not. We think that we've got all this good information, and we like to hope it's good, and maybe it can be better, and maybe we can make a better website experience too. Back to the old buyer enablements kind of conversation. But so much of the information we have on our website and then around the internet is not really helping answer key questions because it's invisible. So I started investigating that, discovered a lot of the ways that we marketers can improve our own website, and then the things that we can do to improve our message consistency and branding, and all for the purpose of showing up better in the LLMSs, whatever they are, right? Whichever one you use, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and they all have different models, by the way, so that when buyers are asking questions, our brands and solutions are turning up better in these responses that are being generated. Because I view this as a new, well, I can get into more of the details, but you asked the question, how did I get into it? That's how I got into it.
Yeah. That's great, David. And then I think you're about to get into this big question that every marketer has right now, which is we've all been using Google and relying on Google search. And even though the algorithm keeps changing, you still kind of understand the basics of that game. And the big question marketers have is AI changing that? What have you found?
So a couple of thoughts there. Absolutely correct. We have oriented our SEO game to Google. It is the big winner in that game. 95% of queries, it dominates that space. In the world of ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Llama, LeChat, Grok, all of a sudden it's a different playing field. There are different players. No one is dominating. Perhaps ChatGPT is dominating a little bit, respectively to the others. But some things to keep in mind, because before we could measure against one goal, essentially, with the LLMSs, right, these different AIs, there's different vendors, and each of the vendors has a different model, and indeed many of them have multiple models. Okay. Different models have been trained using different data sets. Different models also have different real-time augmented generation. They call it RAG, right? So research augmentation. Different other query tools that they use for real-time search. And different models have also got different content licensing arrangements within any particular time period. So what does this all mean? It means we've got a lot of variability. Different models, different real-time search, right? Different capabilities and different data sets. So when we ask the same question in each of these different LLMs, and in some we see our brand represented and in others we don't, we go like, what's going on? Perhaps some of these gaps, because of all these different kind of data sets that are being used and models and interpretations, are what we need to fix. So there isn't a single vendor that is a dominating vendor that we know all of our clients are necessarily using. That may emerge, perhaps, we don't know, or maybe not. Or it could be that the models start to specialize for particular types of use cases. That's possible too. Some say, let's try and focus more on app development types of use cases. Someone will say, let's focus more on creative writing type of use cases. We never know. These things can emerge. And that could be how they develop their model, where they choose to train data, and what information sets they decide to have content licensing agreements on. So that's to speak to the variability, just to start with.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question.
That's a lot of answer already.
If you mind, let me ask you a question on that. The way you're answering that, what I'm hearing is because the models are trained differently, they have different ways about doing it. So you may get different answers. But don't all the models have the ability now to search live on the web for information. So it's not just based on what they have been trained on and how the model has been set up. It's more than that now, isn't that right?
Yes. So that's a great point, and thank you for bringing it out. So in the past, we've modeled our activity towards Google search. All right. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Gemini uses Google search.
Okay.
None of the other ones do.
Okay.
ChatGPT uses Bing. Copilot uses Bing. Right? Llama from Meta uses Bing.
Mm.
Claude uses Brave.
Mm.
And if you're into it, LeChat from Mistral uses Brave.
Okay.
So what's interesting now is that these are different search engines, and they crawl with different bots, and they crawl different things, and their crawlers have different capabilities. Not all crawling bots are equally capable. And there's two sets of bots to be thinking of. One are the training bots, and those are from the LLMs vendors themselves, right? So OpenAI has its own training bot. Claude has, Anthropic has its own training bot and so forth. And then there's the real-time retrieval information bots what do they use?
Mm-hmm.
So those bots also find different things based on what they have previously found, right? What they have indexed.
Okay.
What's interesting about this is that one's natural tendency would be to say, well, gosh, ChatGPT's using Bing, and I hate Bing. I never use Bing. Why would I want to use Bing? But nobody's ever complained about the quality of the answers they get back from ChatGPT. So here's the interesting thing. We know that regular SEO surfaces up the best blue links for our good old-fashioned queries. And those that surfacing process is still important, because when LLMs go off and try and do the real-time search to augment the data set, maybe you've asked the query to force the LLM to go off to do some live stuff so that you're not stuck with the training set. What you can do is you could say, based on current available information in June 2025, so you've kind of signaled, I'm looking for more than just the training.
Yep.
And ChatGPT goes off and it uses Bing and it finds answers. And then it's saying, I'm not so concerned about who came up first. I'm now concerned about, from within that set, what's a good answer? What fits? What is aligned to the intent of the answer? And then the different pieces of information inside each of those pages is kind of graded and scored in a way that matches the intent of the query. And as Barb, before we started today, you were saying how your query pattern has changed. Whereas in the past, you used to fill the little letterbox that we had in Google search with, I don't know, 5 or 6 keywords maybe. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And with ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot or Claude, we might add paragraphs and documents and all sorts of stuff for context. And, like, this is what I'm really looking for. And that's part of why it's so appealing, because our questions are so much better. We can ask better questions and we get so much better answers back. So back to the core of your question, we're using different real-time search agents, and the quality of the answer is more the issue rather than the rankings behind it. And there's some reasons behind that, and we can get into that perhaps, but hopefully that's helpful.
We had a guest on this show who said his money's behind Google because of what you were just talking about, right? They were the king of search, so why wouldn't they be, using the Google engine, And I'm finding that I have a different way or a different ranking of quality on these different platforms when I'm using them for different use cases right now, right? Like, so there's maybe like a quick answer. I'm pushing my button on Copilot, whereas I need a more thoughtful answer. And Alec and I were discussing this the other day, with more thinking and thoughtfulness behind it is maybe even Chat 3.0, right? So it's like there's differences in even these versions now.
That's absolutely the case. And they are superseding each other all the time. right? So what we have today is whatever the playing field is today. A year from now, there'll be something different. So for my own purposes, my own activity set, I use ChatGPT a lot, alternate to Claude, and check and connect with Gemini. And I noticed after Claude did its most recent update of model, that the answers I was getting back from Claude was like, wow, this is pretty good. This is better than I was seeing before. And I noticed my own pattern moving a bit more to Claude now. So we may have a favorite, which is great. And you get to know it. You get to feel it. You get to kind of like understand how best to provide to it. But it's also good to check in with some of the others because our our feeling about it might be different today than it was 6 months ago, because perhaps the model has been updated in a way and you haven't recognized it yet. So it's good to use a few of them. You may say, I'm just going to subscribe to 2, or maybe I'm already getting a free version because of my Google kind of services kind of play. So, okay, cool, I'll use that. But it's always good to have a few different, ask the same question to a few of them, take the output of one and ask the other, hey, I've been working on this project with a friend. And the friend and I have come up with this. Could you critique it for me? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What do you think is missing or perhaps underrepresented in it? So I'm trying to be bland with my language, no emotion, because they pick up on that like no tomorrow, right? And it goes back and says, oh, it's really well structured, and kind of pats itself on the back a little bit about all the good stuff. But then it starts to mention some things that perhaps are interesting to you that you would like to have included. You can do this with the initial query that you received just in ChatGPT. If you're in ChatGPT, you've got an answer. You can ask it to critique its own answer. But what's interesting is the reason it gives you more is because when it goes off to fetch information in the first place, it has a budget. Because let's imagine we asked a really deep question like, what is the meaning of life? Well, that could be a big project. And obviously, the lights around the world could dim unless there was some kind of guardrails. And the guardrails are, we're going to spend a certain amount of budget on these questions. And if you ask another question, we'll spend a bit more budget. So that's part of perhaps to explain why we don't get the extra ideas the first time around, or perhaps they were triaged as being less important or less reliable. And then when you go to another model and ask the same question to critique the first model's answer, well, remember, we've got a different model, different training data, different search capabilities, running against different licensed content platforms, like I've got Reddit now, or I've got this now, whatever it might be. And so that tends to expose some differences too. So by talking through these examples, I hope it helps give people a realistic understanding of, oh, so that's what's going on a little bit. Okay, that makes sense. Sure, makes sense.
Well, I think the next question that the marketer is going to go to then, right? Because I think that's a great explanation. So it helps me understand that. The next question then is, all right, given that's how these LLMs work when you send them a query, what do we need to do differently with the content we put out there then?
Okay. So
because we spend a lot of time figuring out how to optimize content for search engines, for SEO. If it's not exactly that anymore, what differently should we be doing about our content?
Okay. So the first thing, my advice is, this new lathe, a way of cutting information, is exposing some gaps where we have perhaps taken some shortcuts. Because a lot of what we decide to do, and I'll get into that specifically, you say, oh, well, that's just doing our jobs. And absolutely right. Thing is, we're all very, very busy. We're all asked to do more with less. And so we know where to make shortcuts. And it's those shortcuts that create a gap between what we have and what we would wish to have. And in our day-to-day, it's a trade-off and we move on. Okay. Some of these gaps are now exposing, or rather LLMs are exposing some of these gaps and what our projects are to kind of like fill in some of these gaps. So let's talk about what those are. I'll put them into 2 basic categories. There's the stuff that you can do on your website And then there's the stuff you might want to be doing on third-party sites around the internet. Okay. On your website, if anyone has gone through an accessibility project to make their website WCAG accessible for people who have disabilities, you will be familiar with a lot of the activities that might be necessary and helpful. The LLMs are bots, and they can only see what their capability allows them to see. They can't click on anything, at least not currently. That could change. And so some of the information that we think is visible to you and me, we just take it for granted, turns out not to be visible to someone who's blind and using a machine reader as an example, and also turns out to be missing or not visible to LLMs. So some specific examples of what that could be. A very simple one are the logos that go across the bottom or, in a section of our website. These are typically integration partners or some of our, customers, famous customers. Many websites, the ribbon that floats by has these logos, and you can see this is Bank of America, this is, Citizens Bank, this is Lloyd's Bank, or whatever they might be, just to pick on banks. Yeah. We know those logos, that's great. If that's not labeled on the alt text to do with the image, the machines don't know that. It just says image, 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 and they're all just floating by. So the first thing we might say is, okay, well, let's just add, Lloyd's Bank, Bank of America, whatever the other one was, a Citizens Bank, okay, to that. That's good. The next level up would be to add alt text that would say, Lloyd's Bank, a customer of vendor X in the banking industry. And now what we've done is we've added a lot more context so that when a question might come and says, I am looking for a CRM system specifically that has lots of banking customers, I haven't just said Lloyd's Bank, the name of a vendor. I've actually said in the banking industry, right? And so now I am raising the fit by adding some details. So anyone who has done website accessibility knows we want to be making sure that we're labeling all of the images that way. Other images that we have, the headshot of, the VP of marketing, we can label that with David Kirkdorffer, his name, right? Or perhaps it's going to say, and then underneath it has the words VP of marketing. And if it's to do with an endorsement, let's say, what if we were to label that image and the alt text that went with it, David Kirkdorffer, VP of marketing at such and such company, endorsing vendor X. And then, so all of a sudden we've created contextual relevance so that there's something more to grab on. Let's move beyond images. By the way, images can also turn up in numbers. Many times our websites have got numbers that says 67% and then a little bit of text underneath. Improvement in ROI, or whatever it is. And there might just be the number 67%. And it's an image because it's graphically beautiful and stuff like that. Yeah. So we might need to update that tag, not just say it's 67%, but the actual 67% ROI improvement by using product vendor X, whatever it is. Okay, moving on from images, as I said. Yeah. Our websites have H1s, H2s, H3s, H4s, all of those types of things. CMSs, in being helpful to us, have helped, in inverted commas, by taking those H1, H2, H3s and turning them into a style guide. And so many times we are applying a heading based on the style guide rather than the hierarchical sequencing of information. Let me explain what I mean. Yeah. If we had an academic paper that we were reading, it's got a big title, that's the H1. Then it has a subtitle, that would be the H2. And then within that section, you might have part 1, part 2, and part 3. And then within part 1, part 2, and part 3, there are subdivisions, A, B, C. It's all very logical. And if it was kind of written in a way that had an indentation kind of approach every time we added a new section, you would see major title, kind of indents a bunch, then it stops, and then it goes back on, and then next title, and so forth, right?
Mhm.
That's what our H1, H2, H3 are for. That's the purpose. The H4 is a subcategory of information underneath an H3. And that H3 is a subcategory of information under H2. And so it's, kind of like object-oriented programming. You've inherited, this is about this, but within this, we're now talking about this. But then within this, we're now talking about this. So there's a referenceability of meaning. What we're doing with our websites is we're using H6, because it's small and the light gray text, as a little kind of like tag on top of the H3, like features.
Yeah.
And then we have H. And so what's happening is, imagine we go back to our academic document and we said, oh, we're not going to use these headings as logical ways of chunking the information. We're just going to, and we just applied the graphical application. Then all of a sudden, everything gets very confusing. Then all of a sudden, this little H6 seems to be describing this much bigger thing that it isn't supposed to be describing.
Yeah.
So
I think what you're saying is that go back, because you started out by saying that we end up taking these shortcuts.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean now, right? It was easy at one time when it didn't really matter and you could just use them stylistically to make the website look the way you want it to look. But now it's very important to not do that, to use those headings, the headers, in the appropriate way to structure information so that the LLMs can read them better. I think that's what you're getting at, right?
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Yeah.
It helps. It helps a lot. It gives clarity. Right. Otherwise, what happens is it's a little confused. And it kind of gets something, but it may not be getting as well as you would wish.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating that you're talking about the accessibility parallel, right? Because it's really about saying more and spelling it out in the hierarchical order of things, right?
Yeah.
Not just letting your other senses, right, absorb things as we do naturally, right? It kind of moves to the next topic, which is if you have a very thin data set around your topic. Say I'm a very technical, in my business, it's health tech, right? So I'm a very health technical product or something, and I might not have a lot of deep data that's very accessible for people to understand, or it's buried in jargon. What can those brands do to break through a little bit in that sense?
Well, so that's, you may have an advantage. Let me throw out, so I hold that idea and make sure I get back to it if I don't hit it, right? So I said there are two things. There's stuff on your website, and there's a lot of other stuff we can do too. I mean, the first thing to do on our website is make sure it's being crawled. Back in 2023, when this was all happening, a lot of folks were like, ooh, do we want to have our data be, used by everyone? And so someone at that point in time might have said block in the robots text, block these crawlers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been turnover, and the person who did it isn't there, or someone who asked for it is no longer there, and we forgot. So just go back and check. That's a simple thing. Just go back and check that you're not blocking those, because you never know. You might be. Hopefully not. Probably not. But it's a thing to just check for. Now back to the other side. I said there were two things. The other side is what's going on in the rest of the web. Okay. And this comes down to consistency. So we think of LLMs as being kind of a next word generator, because this word happens and this word happened, therefore this word must be the next word that happens, kind of thing, right? It's a simple way of putting things. So we want to make sure that our brands are consistently described. And if we have multiple products, we need to make sure that the brand hierarchy and the sub-brands are clearly distinguished from each other. So the reason, and an example I'll use is, to kind of make it a bit simpler, is think of it as like a word cloud problem. When I go off to discover about what does vendor X do, the fewer things in the word cloud, the more it's defined, the more it's clear, perhaps. The less variability, the less need to interpret. The more things in the word cloud, the more likelihood that I might get confused. As humans, when we go off and try and find what does vendor X do, and we see it in 5 different places, described 5 different ways, which don't seem to corroborate each other, and are all interesting, but leave us with a bit of shadow of a doubt as to, well, which is it? What is it? Happens a lot to startups because we're always pivoting. And over time, we leave a wake of information behind us. 2 years ago, we described ourselves as a flu. Next month, we described ourselves as a flop. And then we were a flip. My joke aside, point is, if we described ourselves differently over time, did we ever go back and clean up the flu and the flop? Because now we're a flip. I don't know. But because we haven't, probably, an LLM says, well, you're one of these 3 things. That can be confusing because nothing's being corroborated. And so it's harder to rely on any one of them because 1 out of 3, okay, I don't know. So now back to your question. If you're a small brand, like many startups, you're a single solution vendor, okay? That is to your advantage in that you don't have lots of sub-brands like Oracle might have, for example. Okay, you think, oh, well, Oracle's got a head start. They're all over the place with everything. And indeed, they do have many advantages. But they also have some disadvantages in that if they have, let's say, 10 different product lines, which of course they have more than that, written about in 10 different product line focused websites, right? So they've got a banking solution. Sorry, they're in banking news and they're described in chemical news and they're described in real estate news, the different relative products, the banking product, the chemical product, and the real estate product. Those articles are invariably going to shortcut the full name of the product down to the word Oracle in their conversations. And now an LLMS is going to go off and find all these different things and might say, well, okay, I'm not quite sure which of these I'm supposed to be thinking of. It has extra work to do to kind of put the right solution to the right capability set. So it's all a game of weights and measures. I can't say what is more important, the overall brand recognition that Oracle brings or the potential confusion that it might give to LLMs because of the wide variety of different products they have and how that they all can be written up in basically the same way using the same tag, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're a single company, here's where it gets complicated for Oracle. Oracle's CRM, maybe not a good example. It's one of many products. So Oracle's depth in the CRM product information set that it provides may only get to a certain level because it's relying on its brand to kind of get into the conversation. Whereas if you had a specialist CRM, it can get deeper and deeper. And so as people are now asking more particular questions, more specific questions that tend to get into the details, the deeper information set may have better answers than the shallow, broad information set. So back to your situation. You see how this is impacting your startup situation in the health tech space? Do you see where that goes?
Totally. So I'm like sitting here, literally, you flip me on this side of the conversation and that side of the debate. Because at first I was like, okay, so I'm hearing you say consistency is king, right? Even more so than we had before. Because if I want to be known for A, B, and C, I have to bring that up. It has to be corroborated. Your corroboration is the key too, right? It has to be corroborated in multiple different sources to come up that way. Because at first I was like, the marketing gamer in me is sitting there going, okay, guess what? I have EHR integration. I have this integration. I have that. I wanted to say all of those just like I normally would, because if you search that feature, I want to come up with, that I'm integrated with that feature.
Well,
but maybe that's not
No. So think of it this way. I'm coming at this again as buyer enablement.
Yeah.
I am not trying to game the system.
Yeah.
The only game I guess I'm trying to play is reveal.
Yeah.
It's not hide and seek. It's find. Okay. I don't want to make it difficult to find my information. I would like to have all the information that is on my website that I have deemed is helpful to a buyer be actually leverageable by the AIs. And the
Right.
more depth I provide, then that's great. Okay, so there are some things I can do to add more depth. The branding thing, I use this example because it's kind of funny. Well, for me perhaps. So back when I was a kid, as many of us did, we read the Iliad or something like Homer, right? That it's a great story, and for teenage boys, it's like it's a battle, so there are heroes. It wasn't so hard to read after all. And each of the heroes has a little epithet that attaches to their name. They have a range of them, right? There's Odysseus the wily, cunning Odysseus, all sorts of things that tell us who Odysseus is, right? That's his branding. Helps us with the story, helps us with the context around why is Odysseus talking. Remember, he's the wily one. So when he says these things, we need to think of it this way. And there's Agamemnon the brave and Hector the this and so forth and so on. Okay, if we started flipping the epithets around and it became Hector the brave and Agamemnon the wily, it would get confusing. It's like, hang on, wait, I thought that was supposed to be the other guy. That's a little bit of how it goes as we're trying to have our brands be recognized for something. So our brand architects, and there are many different ways of architecting brands, and all of them are equal as long as we're consistent about the application on our website, with our partner sites, when we go to trade shows, when we are being mentioned in review sites, right? So consistency. We would like the full name of the product to be referenced at least once per page. And then afterwards, we might just say, instead of Oracle, the 5-word thing, we now, and then in parentheses, Oracle 5-letter thing. So, right. So that we can go to the acronym when we need to. I mentioned acronyms. If you look up the acronym MRO, which could apply to many businesses, it has 50 different applications in 50 different types of uses. When I come to your website and I know what your website does, I infer which application you mean, because I'm probably not familiar with the other 49. AI doesn't have that problem. It's familiar with all of them. Which one are you talking about? Spell out the acronym first. Give me the reference afterwards. This happens a lot when we're talking about technical things, medical things or technical things. And some of these, with only so many letters, and so MRO means all sorts of things. Just pulling out of the hat, I just looked that one up. It has, at least as of last look, 50 different meanings. So this helps with the consistency. It helps bring in what you mean to be to convey more clearly what you're trying to say. Okay, that was a lot. All of these answers aren't really complicated. And once you become sensitive to the idea, it's like, oh, okay, all right, now I know what I can do. And that's a lot of what I'm doing.
Consistency is super intuitive to me, right? I mean, the more AI is picking that up from different places, it's going to be intuitive. It's going to, serve you up in the same way. I think that's probably the right call.
Right. AIs prefer to leverage and use information that they can find, widely found, similarly described, because it tends to be self-asserting, corroborating. When things get vague, or rather, I should say, when the same query brings back a cloud of all sorts of different types of things, then the AI has to it wants to answer. It's like a puppy dog, right? We've all experienced that. It really wants to answer, even if it makes up an answer, or it starts to make connections that really aren't good connections. So the tighter the information set is focused on one zone, the better off you are. As showing up in an LLMS response.
Okay, I have a clarifying question, because as I hear you explain it, it's making some sense to me, but now I got to go back to where I started. Because here's what I heard you say: when an LLM, or when you're doing AI to answer a question, you started by explaining the different search engines that each of the LLMs uses. So they all use a search engine, and then when they get the search results, the AI is doing the work of a human to try to read that and synthesize what it learned from that so it can present a cogent answer to you. But it starts still from them using a search engine. So to me, that means that search engine optimization is still a key part. Do you agree?
Search engine optimization is still a key part. And there are some things that we can do to help with search engine optimization that we maybe didn't think of necessarily to do. Here, one of the differences to keep in mind is that when SEO is returning pages, because it's driven to drive us to blue links.
It wants to give you the little search result.
LLMs aren't looking for pages. They're looking for information chunks.
Okay.
One page might be chunked up into lots of different little pieces. So it's not using the whole page to synthesize an answer. It's using the chunk on the page that is relevant to the answer. And how is it knowing what's a good chunk and where a chunk begins and ends? Partly because of the delimiters that we have used, like H1, H2, H3, H4.
Okay.
So that's partly the delimiting factor. And it grabs all this information and it scores for how well that information aligns to the intent of the query. And the things that score higher become part of the, okay, I'll use this stuff. I'll use this stuff. I found all this stuff, score it. No, that's good. But this is the best stuff. I'll use this stuff.
Yeah. Are you saying that when when an LLM goes to use a search engine to conduct a search, the information that it gets back and that it reads, do we have the ability to influence the type of information that comes back if we do a better job of structuring the information on our website?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
So for example, the exact same content on your website.
Yeah.
With no H1, H2, H3, H4, but just one H1, the title, and you haven't used any of the rest of it.
Yeah.
Is not likely to do as well because we've only got a limited budget of tokens. And I'm going to spend a certain number of tokens on a query in a place. I don't want to read the whole damn thing. So when we have all of the H1, H2, H3 type of stuff in there, we're delimiting little chunks and it can go off and scan through the titles. So if the heading itself, H2, says features, that could be okay. It's better than nothing. But if it said features specifically designed to help doctors with something, whoa, now that's a really juicy title, a very particular thing. And if my question aligns to that title and the information underneath it is tightly on that topic, I have signaled, the signal is, this is, over here, the answer over here, right? As opposed to just read the whole page and figure it out yourself. We're giving signposts. So this is part of what I'm suggesting about our laziness because, hey, we do what we do because it works for us.
Yeah.
But there's and we make trade-offs based on how much effort we know people will put into it. Well, now that trade-off has changed because now we're not willing to put in the same effort as before because who goes off and searches through all those blue links to kind of extract the good bit, see if there's a good bit. Okay, let's look at the next 10 blue links and see maybe I can make a better query. Maybe that'll, and you kind of iterate until you can finally find the bit inside of a page that answered your question. So I'm going a little bit off track there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's good. Does this mean then that if you do an AI search on, let's say, your company and the information comes back and it's a little bit off and you're like, geez, that's not what I wanted to say about my company? I would infer from what you've told me that the best thing I could do next then is to go back and try to rethink how I am describing my company on the website and through the headers and things like that and tighten that up.
That's one part of it. That's one part of it. But the other thing that might be happening is that let's imagine you did a rebrand, right? Or you were acquired by another company.
Yeah.
And so now all the positioning has changed. So you've updated everything perfectly on your own website. So it's not to do with your website necessarily. It's to do with what else is out there. And so that's what I mean about kind of trying to clean up the wake of information that we might have left behind us as things have changed. So if you absolutely discover you're not coming back, first of all, if one level of this is you ask about your category, your company wasn't included, but some of your competitors were. So you might say, please show me the sources of where you received that information from. And you
Mhm.
check and you go like, well, heck, there's that listing. No, we're not in that listing. Okay, make a note. I want to get onto that listing, right? And then you do that across all of the LLMs. So
Mhm.
same query, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot,
Mhm.
other ones, and
Mhm.
you turn up in some and not in others, and you ask for the references of where they turn up, and you discover, okay, well, there's a few different places my competitors are turning up and I'm not. I need to go back,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. I would assume the onus is on you to keep your information updated and even maybe um, lean in toward use cases and things that you think people are searching for your product around, right?
Yes. So, for example,
Because that's how, as the buyer priority, right? That's how I might look, are you connected with Athena Health? And if you are, then I get that piece that's pulled up right away. But if I haven't put anything up on my website for a year,
right,
you're probably that's gonna bring you down the priority scale, right?
absolutely right. So, for example, we have many of our technical products have integrations, and so it's customary to have an integrations page.
Yeah.
So we would like all those integrations to show up when an LLMS does a search looking for integrations. So one way is to make sure that all those logos that we have are appropriately labeled, right? That there is an ability for the LLMS to read, the crawlers to read the information. Another simple way to do is just list them all out, just word listing, and then what they are. This integration does this to help you do this. That could be part of it. I'm working with a client now to help get a spec sheet onto the website, because a spec sheet is something, especially because it's a very technical product.
Yeah.
Okay, it used to be a downloadable PDF. PDFs aren't easily read by all crawling bots. Case studies are often in PDFs. Oh, we don't get it anymore. We're good, right? No, it could be better if you just put it into HTML. Let the PDF exist. If you want to download it, that's great. You can do whatever you want, but translate it and make it text. Make it regular, just HTML. And now all of a sudden it becomes part of the corpus that's available.
Yeah.
Webinars you
Seems
do.
I have to translate everything into words, no imagery.
Well, you can do image. Well, that is part of the challenge. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. So how do I label
Yeah.
this? So, for example, when I post something to LinkedIn, we all do this. We add an image that we think helps the post in some capacity. I will go to ChatGPT, give it the image, and say, "Hi, here's my post. Here's my image. Could you please help me by writing the accessibility text for this image?"
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, poof, right? And it's like, okay, I don't have to think about how do I write this, because it'll do that quite well for me. And it's like, thank you very much. And I can now add that into the accessibility text
Perfect.
option within LinkedIn.
I love that.
David, switch gears for 1 second. Now, everybody's talking about brand authority
Yeah.
now, right? And how has that changed with coming up in AI? And we've talked a little bit about, outside sources, third party endorsements. Talk a little bit about that because, I look at that and I go, oh my God, PR is back.
Yeah. Earned media. Does that have how does that help?
Yes, it does, because all of a sudden it helps get a consistent information picked up across multiple places that are related to where your buyers, in theory, care to go. So there have been charts that have gone around recently in the last couple of weeks that show which LLMs seem to be getting which information from which origin sources. One of the vendors that has done this is Ahrefs. Another one is Profound. There are different ones. And they're basically painting the case. Look, see how this LLMS seems to be using Wiki more than this one seems to be using Reddit, that type of thing. Okay. My advice is, rather than try and chase the source, which are always changing based on the content licensing arrangements that have been made. And by the way, all the places that have content are trying to make these arrangements to make some money out of it, because nobody's coming to their website so much anymore. So go to the places where your buyers would typically go to get information. And then your PR is going to, if it's well written and relevant to the moment, it gets picked up there, hopefully consistently. if you want to encourage your PR, then all the best practices of PR about like provide a picture, provide a graphic, then go ahead and suggest here's the alt text to use, because that's helping them, right? Be buyer-centric to their need. Their need is, what am I going to put up here? If you give them juicy, good stuff, then you're likely to, you have a good picture, of course. That kind of doesn't matter if your product sucks. If you've got a great diagram, it looks good. Well done. But add the alt text so that the diagram becomes something they can label properly, for example. The way you break up your press release, now you might want to think about what those headings are in an interesting way. And the guidance is not to try and think, well, what would an LLMs look for? Yeah. It's like, well, what would a person look for? Because that's the person who's using the LLMs, right? At least at this point in our history, that's how it works. So we're writing for people. We're trying to expose the information in a way that is accessible to the LLMs to pick up on. And we might want to adjust what we write to be a little less poetic and a little bit more easy to interpret. And maybe the easiest way to that's a good way to think of it. Sometimes we write for our websites to have brand personality. And that's not wrong. But if I was to give a poem by E.E. Cummings to an LLMs and a tech doc and tell me what they're about, ask the question, the poetry, of course, is highly more variable, as it should be, because it's an experience, right? Whereas the tech doc is far more singular. So I don't want us to just turn into drones reading tech documents, because that wouldn't work either. So it's so that we don't know how, there's a blending together. Does that I hope these are helpful analogies.
I think it really is, David. I think you've helped understand, at least you've helped me understand a little bit of the mystery behind it. And once you understand what actually is going on, it actually it's not that difficult to kind of be able to figure out. It's like, oh, okay, we just need to make things clear, right? With more clarity, right? With more consistency, right? With more structure. The odd thing, ironic way, is that by using an AI engine, it's forcing us to write better for human beings to understand, right? Which is kind of a funny thing. But,
that's what I mean about it's exposing gaps.
Yeah.
But we know what to do, but we haven't because we've known the shortcuts a little bit.
Right.
And we have to wear many hats.
Right.
Quickly during our day. So we're not asked to do, we're asked to do more with less. We all know that.
Yeah.
In fact, I even have a hat that says that.
Yes.
Why not, right? But we're not asked to do well.
Yeah.
Because that takes more time.
Right.
And so we have learned to use the shortcuts. We're going to use the H1, H2, H3 as a graphical element as opposed to a canonical kind of information segmentation that it was originally designed for.
Yeah,
and that's an example. It's a silly example, but it's a powerful one. Something I haven't talked about, and probably you don't have time for us to get into, but would ask that, our listeners, if they have found this interesting, to investigate the notion of chunking, which is like, what? My inner seventh grader is like all of a sudden, having a little laugh riot inside them. David, we're about to talk about good chunks and bad chunks, right? Look up chunking, because that'll help with the heart of the conversation we're talking about, where an LLMs isn't reading the whole page to get the answer and putting it all together. It's looking at little pieces.
Yeah.
And the notion of, I'm not going to spend like $1 million to try and get this answer. I've got a certain budget. So I've got to find something quickly. And, being efficient isn't a bad thing. So you don't.
Well, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that as a tease to kind of get to the next topic. Where can people come find you if they want to learn more or follow you? Because I think you're starting to post and blog on LinkedIn, but how do people get in touch with you?
So I am very active on LinkedIn. One way is obviously just connect with me. My name, David Kirkdorffer. That's if you're listening and not watching. That's Kirk, D for David, OR, FF, double F as in Fred Flintstone, ER. A shorter thing is to search for the hashtag in LinkedIn, David K, the letter K, and then AI, the letters AI, all as one string. So hashtag DAVIDKAI. And that hashtag will kind of bring to you, in rather random order, lots of posts that I've written on this topic, including one article that Barb, I think you were talking about, that you had read. That maybe is, if you could put that into the show notes, that article link, that would be a great place to start.
How to get AIs like ChatGPT, Gemini to mention you and your B2B brand. It's going in.
Yep.
It's a great article.
Thank you.
Chunks.
Thank chunks. Right. Well, I don't talk about chunks there, but elsewhere. And you can, I'm not the only person talking about this. Again, my perspective is, I'm demand gen. I want to drive business.
Yeah.
I discovered that my websites were not working well, so I wanted to create a better website experience. So I went to buyer enablement. Let's get the good information so that buyers can find us. Because there's lots of research we can see now where buyers only contact us when they're ready to, and once they've figured out what the selection set. These are the two vendors. And so they're doing everything before they speak to us. So let's get all that sales rep good stuff, if we have that kind of motion, as much as possible on the website. Buyer enablement. Now I want to make sure we have AI enablement. Let's get all that good stuff into this new place, because AI is turning into an analyst and a channel. Unlike the blue links, where you go to the blue links and you decide which bits of which blue links are the good bits and put it together, somewhat like an analyst, the AIs are curating the information available, choosing what it will include in a conversation, and presenting the pieces that it thinks is good.
Mm-hmm.
So you're being disintermediated out of this conversation. Now, when we went off to Gartner and Forrester, we would say, here's my context, here's what I'm doing. I saw your Forrester wave, I saw your Gartner Magic Quadrant. So, but based on what I just shared with you, who should I look at? I can't look at all 20. And the analyst would say, well, then based on your context and what I know about them and what I know about you, here, take a look at these 4 or 5. Not everyone has that analyst relationship, and not every category is neatly defined that way. So now that's kind of what we're doing with ChatGPT at a certain level. And deep research blows the doors wide open on what's potentially possible. Mm-hmm. It's also a channel. Because people are going there to get the answers, that's where we want our answers to turn up. But it's like a journalist writing in real time. I'm putting together an article real time. So the PR person's going like, hang on, wait, I haven't had a chance to give you my pitch. You haven't heard my thing yet. So I got to serve up all this information so it's ready for it to be able to do that. So it's a channel, and it's kind of like an analyst or an influencer, because it's curating which information it's actually going to share with you.
Yeah, it's absolutely like an influencer.
Right? And so I made a post yesterday that proved to be moderately popular, suggesting that people, have you guys read this book? Hang on, I'm reaching behind here.
Oh yeah, yep,
right,
yeah.
Okay,
nice. Yeah.
So we might want to add another line to the version, to the publishing edition from 2025 is no forms, no cold calls, no spam, and no website visits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, just AI influence.
That's right. That's the fear, right? Yeah. Well, David, thank you for that. That was a good wrap up and a good close. Appreciate the conversation. I think it's been very helpful and enlightening. And there's sure to be more to learn on this and more to come. So thanks for the insight.
You're very welcome. Thank you.